this is my contact info. If you want to tweet something during the presentation or follow me afterwards, if you have questions afterwards, anything like that, this is the way to get in touch with me. This is going to be sort of like a higher level talk, so there's not going to be a ton of code or anything like that. Actually, let me use this one. This sounds a little bit better, right? This is going to be a higher level talk. Not a ton of code, because we're going to have those code labs later on. So if you're new to Polymer, there will be a code lab that leads you through all the different steps of creating your first element and using data binding and all that cool stuff. Instead, what I wanted to do today was just sort of take a look at not just Polymer, but web components, and where we have come over the past year, and where I see things going in 2016 and moving forward. Now, quickly to start off, if you are unfamiliar with web components, you've never seen them before, or you don't quite know how they work, I wanted to just sort of try and summarize them as quickly as I could, sort of in one slide. So to me, this is almost like a quintessential example of web components. The idea behind web components is we want to give developers the ability to create their own HTML tags. So literally extending HTML itself, defining brand new HTML elements that have never existed before. And because you're doing this using native APIs that ship as part of the web platform, these new tags that you create should be able, in theory, to be used in sort of any application, any context, regardless of the various frameworks or libraries that are also being used in that app. So long as those frameworks and libraries know how to work with HTML, they should be able to work with this new element that you've created. So in this case, I've created this paper tabs element, and inside there are a few children, these individual paper tabs. And this element has its own look and feel, it has its own behavior, and anyone who can read and understand HTML should very quickly and easily be able to sort of grok what this element is doing and how they can use it in their own application. Now, when I talk about web components, and I kind of go through this example, the next question that comes up for a lot of folks is they're like, well, that's cool, but why should I care? Because I already use a tool like Angular or React or some other framework out there. I feel like I can already build components, I can already build applications, so why use this thing when I already have my little library or framework of choice that works for me? And I think that's a really good question, and I feel like to answer that question, you need to go look at a website like ToDoMVC. And if you go to ToDoMVC, what you'll see is that there's a lot of frameworks out there for building applications. There's not just one framework or two frameworks or 10 or 20. There are many different libraries for building your own app, right? And what's interesting is that no one of these is like the champion, We all use some or a few of them. Actually, as I was doing this, a new one came out literally yesterday. I just discovered this one, which I will put at the bottom of the list because it starts with Y. This is Yo-Yo. And Yo-Yo describes itself as a tiny library for building modular UI components using DOM diffing and ES tag template literals, powered by Bell and Morph DOM, and based on the Yo-Yo data binding pattern. So that's cool. That sounds really great, right? But it makes me wonder if maybe there's sort of a deeper issue going on here, and if rather than sort of being in pursuit of this idea of building a better framework, if it would be a better use of our time to try and just build a better web platform. And instead of looking for features in all these different frameworks or whatever that mean that we need to go off and kind of live in that silo, why don't we look at the features that developers really like about those different frameworks and roll those into the web platform, right? So if it's something like DOM diffing, let's explore how we can add that to the platform the same way that we've been doing with web components, that we have a component model that everyone can use. And the idea here is that ultimately what we want to do is make sure we're building just this nice universal platform so that the web continues to be an inclusive place where anyone feels like they can get started and be productive and start building their own application. So that's really the goal of web components. I see it as a long-term investment in the health of the web platform. Now, since we're talking about building a better web, we should probably talk about standards. And as some of you might know, web standards is a slow process. And while it is slow, over the past year, we've actually made a ton of progress in the world of web components. And so I thought it'd be cool just to sort of reflect on what has happened in 2015 and also what's kind of starting to happen now in 2016. So in the space of web components, there are four main specifications, four main standards that we are working on. It's template, shadow DOM, custom elements, and HTML imports. And to start with kind of the good news, the template specification is now shipping pretty much everywhere. So if you go to a site like Can I Use, you can see that all the modern browsers are shipping template. The exception here is IE11. It didn't quite make the cut for IE11, but template is now in Microsoft Edge. And Microsoft folks, I believe, are trying to really encourage folks to upgrade to Edge as soon as possible. And all the other browsers, Safari, iOS included, are now shipping template. So that's awesome. One of the four. We can check it off the list. Shadow DOM, another one, which is a very cool, very powerful technology. It gives you the ability to scope your CSS and to actually write these little encapsulated components. And for a long time, this was a very contentious piece of the web component specification because it's big, it's very powerful. And thankfully, over the sort of the past year, everybody came on board. We had a lot of series of face-to-face meetings where all the different browser vendors kind of hashed out the contentious bits of Shadow DOM. And Shadow DOM is now actually behind a flag shipping in WebKit, which is pretty awesome, meaning that it's coming to Safari and iOS very soon. Folks at Microsoft Edge put out a blog post recently talking about their plans to implement Shadow DOM and custom elements as well. So they're planning to start prototyping it this year, which is really exciting. Custom elements, another big part of the web component specification. This is the ability to actually define your own tag. And again, this is one of those things which was contentious for a while, and now we have everyone on board. Everyone has had face-to-face meetings to sort of sort out the contentious bits. So the folks at WebKit have said that they're actually just going to go ahead and start implementing this without a prefix, just enabled by default. So again, I'm expecting to see custom elements perhaps landing in a version of Safari this year, which would be really awesome. And similarly, folks at Firefox, I was just having a conversation the other day with Wilson Page, who's an engineer over there, and it looks like they're going to be starting to tackle custom elements in April. And they also already have Shadow DOM behind a flag in Firefox. So again, we're seeing a lot of really good progress there. So that just leaves HTML imports. And anybody who's followed web components knows that HTML imports have had like kind of a rough childhood, I guess I would describe it. If you look them up on MDN right now, and you look for the docs for HTML imports, you will see quite clearly that Firefox will not ship HTML imports. They've made that very clear. And so for some of us, it's like, oh man, it's like a total bummer, right? Because that felt like a really cool part of web components that we really wanted to ship. And what has happened since then is some folks on the Chrome team have thought about this. And they've said, what if we could reimagine the way that we did HTML imports? And rather than the current system that we have, where you have HTML imports, and then you have ES6 modules, and they sort of exist as separate worlds, what if we could imagine building HTML imports on top of the ES 2015 module loader? This is an idea that has been floated with the folks at Firefox and Safari, and they seem like they have positive feelings towards this idea. Maybe an HTML module system or something like that. So you could have, if you wanted to, you could still have the declarative version in markup, but under the hood, it would just be using the module loader. The same thing that loads your JavaScript would also be able to load HTML documents, which would be wonderful for templating and things like that. So this was actually sort of a quasi-proposal from some engineers on the Chrome team. It's been floated around on GitHub. You can go and you can check it out at bit.ly/imports modules. It's a really kind of a cool idea, and it goes through the concrete steps that would need to happen to extend the ES6 module loader. Because the module loader is supposed to be extensible, this should be within the realm of possibilities. So yeah, if you're really interested in sort of seeing where we might be heading, they're planning to have a future face-to-face meeting to discuss this proposal. And so again, hopefully this year we'll have basically, I don't know if I'd call it like closure or what, but we will reach a point with web components where we have everybody on board, everybody signed up on the different specifications, actually implementing and starting to ship in 2016, which is pretty exciting. So yeah, progress. Gradual progress, but progress, okay? Now, outside of just the standards themselves, we've also been building this library called Polymer, which I'm assuming some of you are familiar with. If you haven't heard of it before, Polymer is it's a little library that basically sugars these web component standards that I was talking about, just sugars sort of the native JavaScript calls, so you can do a little bit of fancier things with them. And ultimately our goal here is just to make it easier for you to build web components. We just want to make it a little bit easier to use the native APIs. Over the past year, we're now seeing about 3.5 million pages have started using Polymer in production, which is pretty awesome. And within Google itself, there's been a pretty big explosion of growth. So I've got this chart here And I've taken off the y-axis because I can't give you exact numbers. But what I can tell you is what you're seeing is the purple line is the number of new elements being created within Google. The teal line is the number of new projects. And while I can't tell you the exact numbers here, what I can say is that purple line is many thousands of elements. The blue line is multiple hundreds of projects. So within Google, there's now a few hundred projects that are starting up using Polymer and using web components, which is pretty rad. Some that have already launched into production. YouTube Gaming is actually built using Polymer, some folks might not realize. Google Play Music, that went through a total facelift and is now built using Polymer 1.0. And how many of you have heard of TensorFlow or seen some TensorFlow? Yeah, the machine learning thing. Okay. I have absolutely no idea what it does, but I do know that their dashboard was built with Polymer, which is pretty cool. So yeah, you're starting to see Polymer and web components appearing within Google in large projects like Play Music, and also in these sort of like cool, interesting like niche areas like TensorFlow. So I think that's really exciting. We're seeing like huge uptake within Google itself. And along with that, the library is getting a lot smaller and getting a lot faster. So anytime you talk about Polymer, you talk about web components, maybe on like Hacker News or something like that, you'll probably see something that looks like this. Where you'll be like, oh, I'm using Polymer, and someone will be like, actually, like, it's super bloated because it has polyfills. You probably shouldn't use it. Which is, you know, it's kind of lame when someone says that. And I went and I sat down and I just like looked at the numbers because I see this from time to time. And it really bums me out when someone says this. And I was like, okay, what is the actual size of polyfilling web components and Polymer? So for the polyfills, right, polyfilling all these web component technologies, once you have juiced up your polyfills, which you should be doing for any JavaScript that you serve from your server, it's about 11K, which actually to me does not seem so bad for polyfills. Polymer library itself is a grand total of 35 kilobytes. So you combine it together and it's about 46K for all web components and all of Polymer, which I think is a pretty decent trade-off. I don't know how many jQueries that is. Maybe it's like 1.1 jQueries or something like that. But I think that's a decent trade-off for folks, especially if this is a tool that you're using for you know, you feel like it makes you more productive when you're building your app. You know, as these different technologies become standardized, there's fewer things that we need to polyfill. So the library over time gets smaller and smaller. And between version 1.0 and version 1.3, which is what we're on now, the library is actually reduced in size by 20%. And we aim to continue doing that so that, you know, once web components are shipping everywhere, when you don't have any polyfills, and Polymer itself is just this like thin layer on top of the native APIs just to make you a little bit more productive. So I think 2015 was a solid year for web components. Again, it's been sort of like nice, solid progress. Now, let's talk about 2016 though, because there's a lot of really cool stuff that we had planned for this year. The Polymer team just did about like a full quarter's worth of planning to figure out all the stuff that we want to do in the first half of this year. And we've got about 3 big areas that we're planning to work on. The first is progressive web apps. And the second is improving developer workflow. And the last one is just making sure that we're working better with our community. So starting with progressive web apps, I'm curious, just showing hands, how many of you have heard of that term before? Okay, a handful of you, all right. So for those of you who haven't, a progressive web app is basically, the term itself refers to like, Aaron, do this. The term itself refers to kind of like a series of guidelines for your application, right? So we think of it kind of like an umbrella. And a progressive web app is an application that is responsive. It's an application that's connectivity independent because it has a service worker and it can work offline. It gives you app-like interactions. You know, it has a nice sort of like shell and content loading model and all those cool things. And so really what we like to say is that it's kind of like a website that just took all the right vitamins. And there's a lot of things that we feel like we can do in Polymer to make this easier for developers to build these really great experiences. So the first is just making sure that your application is responsive. And this is an area where I think web components really excel because you can take a really complex layout and compartmentalize it into these individual components. And so there's some experimental things we've been working on called app layout elements. And though we're not officially releasing them just yet, we are, I think, at a point where we're ready for developers to start playing with them. And the idea with these elements is we wanted to take something that was really, really flexible for developers to use to build these awesome sort of scaffoldings for their progressive web apps. And make sure that, you know, what we're building is not too tied to Google's material design library. So what we put out is easy for developers to theme, so they can apply their own branding to it and make an app that, you know, feels like their product. So I'll show you an example here. This is a little application that I built using these elements. This is called Super Cool Blog. And if you're familiar with our paper elements, this should look, familiar. You've got kind of like a header layout there that's setting up the scaffolding for the page. You've got a header where you can apply different attributes to define sort of the behaviors that it's going to use. So in this case, we're saying, oh, the header should be fixed, and things when they scroll underneath it, cast a little drop shadow using that waterfall attribute. And the rest of your content just goes down into that main area. So you get this really nice scaffolding. It's already responsive out of the box, and instead you just have to add the little bits that are bespoke to your app. The app layout elements themselves are actually available on GitHub today if you want to play around with them. So they're at polymerlabs.github.io/app layout. And along with posting the elements themselves, what we're going to be doing is putting up application templates. So similar to that super cool blog that I was showing, we'll be putting up a few other application templates so that you can just grab one of those off the shelf if it has sort of the UI that you like, and you can just start using that and fill it with your own content. You don't have to go through the process of laying out everything yourself. So that's one of the things that we're working on, just making sure that it's easier to build responsive applications. The next thing that we've been working on is making sure that these applications that you build load really fast. Because if you have customers who are in emerging markets, they're probably going to be dealing with spotty or really congested networks. And so for them, a really fast loading initial web experience is super crucial. And one of the things we've learned over the past couple of years building these applications is just making sure that when you're building a Polymer app, you want to make sure you're not blocking the renderer, waiting on your polyfills to load, or your elements to load, or your element definitions to import and boot up. And so my teammate Eric Weidelman has put together this really awesome site called Polymer Fast. This is at polymerfast.appspot.com. And this is sort of like a catalog of good performance patterns to make sure that your app renders as fast as possible. And it goes through a few different criteria, a few different patterns that you could choose from, and kind of goes through the pros and cons of different ones. So to show you an example of that, this is that same sort of super cool app that I was showing just a second ago. We've got an original version, and then a version where I'm using one of the patterns that's mentioned on that site. And when I load it, what you'll see is that the version that is using that sort of async skeleton pattern, it just sort of loads a little bit faster. It kind of feels like I'm getting that initial experience a bit sooner. And we really want to make sure that this is the thing that, when people are interacting with Polymer apps, this is what it feels like. It feels like the app is really snappy. And when you roll in a thing like service worker and offline caching, that it can actually be even just instantaneous on the second visit. So what we want to make sure is that anytime anyone is building a progressive web app with Polymer, it has that really compelling feel to it, and it's something that they want to save to their home screen and take with them. Now the last thing that we've been working on is making sure that we are adding in sort of the missing framework pieces so that developers feel like they have the tools to build full-blown applications. One of the things that a lot of developers have been asking about is a carbon router. This is something which we weren't actually originally, like we said earlier, we weren't originally planning to talk about it tonight, but Peter is here. He's going to give us a little demo of it in 10 minutes, which will be pretty awesome. So yeah, we're planning, I say we're planning to release this in the first half of 2016. I'm going to, I guess, hold Peter to that. And after Carbon Router, we have plans to tackle things like internationalization and localization, and also to just sort of reduce the amount of complexity that goes on in our data binding system, make it easier for folks to wire up sort of complex state in their application without a bunch of hoop jumping or anything like that. So this is the big areas that we're working on related to progressive web apps. The next thing that we're working on is just improving the general workflow for developers. So if this is your first time building a Polymer application, you're just getting started, or you're at a point where you're about to launch an application into production, we want to make sure that you're having a really, really awesome experience and that you feel sort of very empowered by the tools that are available to you. So one of the things that a lot of developers have asked us for is a CDN. And while we're not creating a production CDN yet, we do have what we're calling right now a dev CDN called PolyGit. This is a CDN that uses GitHub's raw Git CDN service. And what it lets you do is sort of very quickly build a JS bin or a code bin or just a local sample app. If you just want to experiment with Polymer and a few of the elements there, so you don't have to go and install a bunch of things using a package manager or anything like that. So it's great for prototyping. And I'll give you a little example of using PolyGit. So to import something from PolyGit, you write out an HTML import like this. The href here refers to polygit.org/components. And then from that components directory, you can pull in basically anything that you would assume would be sort of in any of our GitHub repos. So you can pull in Polymer, you can pull in paper elements or iron elements or anything like that. Using a super long URL like that might get very tedious. And so what we recommend is that you actually put it into a base tag, and then you just do relative imports for everything thereafter. The nice thing about Polygit is that since it's using GitHub's raw git CDN, you can also configure it to pull in your own projects or anything else that's on GitHub, which is really interesting. So the pattern for doing that was something like this. So let's say I want to fetch the latest tag of this markdown project from the Rob Dodson user on GitHub. What I do is I'd say, oh, okay, the library is called markdown plus the user plus either the branch, the version, or an asterisk, which means grab the latest tag. And so in practice, that looks something like this. So you can see here I'm configuring Polygit up there in the corner there to pull in my markdown library. And now I can just assume that that element has been loaded and I can just import it like I import anything else. So you can use this, for instance, to import a markdown element and use it inside of JSBin. Now, if you want, I've taken this JSBin and actually set it up for you. So it's at bit.ly/polybin. It has polygit and everything set up already. So I use this probably like 10, 20 times a day. Like people ask questions all the time on Slack and on Twitter about how to do something in Polymer. And I just fire up polygit in JSBin and I start packing together a little sample. So it's great for just sort of like sketching out ideas. Or if you're just experimenting with Polymer and you want to do something local. Now eventually though, like I said, this is a development CDN. It's not meant for production use cases just yet because it doesn't allow you to vulcanize or concatenate your elements together or anything like that. So eventually you will need to use Package Manager. And this is an area where we've also gotten a lot of feedback from developers. They're like, I really like NPM. I'd like to use NPM for everything in my project, but Polymer tells me that I need to use Bower. So that's a bummer because I have to use Package Manager to install Package Manager. And would it be possible to just use NPM for everything? And while we're still experimenting on this and working through all the details, we are now actually publishing all of our packages on NPM. So this is a big change that we're kind of getting behind this year. This conversation about doing this started about 2 years ago on GitHub. So we've been having this discussion for a very long time. Really long time. Thinking through it a lot. And now it's all up at npmjs.com/Polymer. So, yay, yeah. All of our elements, you'll see when you go to NPM, they are using NPM scopes, which is a new feature in NPM. So you notice that everything starts with a little @ sign. So to install something, npm install save @Polymer/paper button or something like that. The scopes mean that we don't have to do the whole npm land grab thing, where you're like, oh, somebody already named their thing paper button. I guess I can't ever. That sucks. Instead, we get a sort of our own little carved out space on npm where we can create whatever repo or project we want. Now, this is sort of a new feature, scopes. So it doesn't have as good of integration with npm as with their search tools and things like that. They're actively working on that stuff, and yeah, so we hope to see a lot more sort of uptake of usage of npm and Polymer elements in the future. We've also got this project. I'll share these slides out so you don't have to write down all these links. We have this project called Emoji Selector, which has a little example of how to use npm in your application. We're still working through all of the details of how to make sure that npm works well with HTML imports. The biggest issue right now is around resolving conflicts and flattening your directory structure. So npm still, has some issues there which we're working through, but we want to work them through with the community. The community has asked us to put these things out there and to sort of work together to come up with a solution. So yeah, there may be rough edges here, but it's a really cool, promising start, I think. Now, on the subject of npm, just in general, some of the feedback I've been getting from a lot of developers is that npm is sort of it's like an annoying but necessary evil of your developer workflow. If you're building a web application today, it's no longer as simple as just create an index file and start typing. It's install npm, and then install your stuff, and then install gulp, and then Babelify, all that stuff, right? So you end up with just this proliferation of tools. And this is not specific to Polymer. You have this in React, you have this in Angular. Every ecosystem right now is sort of exploding with tools. And so what we want to do is see if there's a way that we can make that easier for developers. So kind of the third big thing that we're working on in terms of developer workflow is actually building a CLI for Polymer to sort of take a lot of these tools and a lot of the setup work and just sort of compartmentalize it so you don't have to deal with all that stuff. Again, the idea here is we want to build like a collection of sort of common tasks for scaffolding and productionizing your application. And today we have tools that sort of do this. We have the Yeoman generator, which is pretty cool. We have Polymer Starter Kit, which maybe some of you have worked with before. But both of these projects are sort of like off to the side a little bit, right? Like they're not necessarily like first-class citizens. We don't make sure that everyone who's starting a Polymer project has the Yeoman generator installed or anything like that. So what we want to do is look at both of these and sort of factor out the really good bits and get the entire ecosystem using those things through this CLI. The other part of this is sort of coming up with a universal project structure for Polymer applications. And that way, when your CLI knows the structure of your app, you can do interesting things. So today, the Yeoman generator, it knows the structure of the application that it stamps out. And so you can do things like create an element. And when you create that element, it knows exactly where to put the element. It knows how to wire up your imports. It knows how to set up your unit test for you, just because it knows where everything lives, right? So we want to give everyone that opportunity who's building a Polymer app. We don't want to force everyone to like have to go install a Yeoman generator if they're maybe not so into that. But there's a lot of other things that we could do beyond just like wiring of elements. We could do linting. We could do transpilation to ES 2015, so you don't have to set up Babel or any of that stuff. Possibly resolving and loading ES 2015 modules, running Vulcanize, right? There's a bunch of sort of like greenfield work that's in front of us that we could do for this CLI. So we're going to be exploring doing some or all of these things this year, so anyone starting a Polymer app can just get up and running super fast. Now the last thing that we're going to be working on is just engaging with the community better and making sure that it doesn't feel like an us and them ecosystem. So part of this is just increasing our visibility, like talking about where we're heading and making sure that we have our roadmap, our code of conduct, our contributing guidelines, all of these things front and center so developers have insight into what's happening in 2016, 2017, and beyond. So we started a new project. So it's github.com/polymer/project. And this is where we are sort of detailing all of these things. So putting up our roadmap, but also like creating a space where folks can open issues. And we can actually have an area where we can discuss like the direction that Polymer is headed in. So for something like adding, what do we have here? So property validation, right? So if we want to add property validation to Polymer elements, like we can discuss that in the open with folks in our community, so it doesn't just feel like, surprise, some feature showed up. The other thing that we're doing is making sure that we're improving our maintenance and making sure that we're keeping our issues and PRs in check better. Right now we maintain about 144 repos across the Polymer elements, and Google Web Components organizations. It's because we create tons of elements, right? And it can be difficult to triage that many bugs because the surface area is pretty vast. So GitHub recently has rolled out support for issue templates. So you're going to be seeing these in all our repos now. So anytime you're creating a new issue on a Polymer element, we're going to ask you to hopefully put together a demo for a JS bed, which we can do using Polygit now. Reproduction steps, a list of the browsers that are affected. And again, we're not doing this to put hurdles in front of people. We're doing this because oftentimes the issues that we do get are missing sort of critical bits of information, which makes it a lot harder to debug those issues and to fix the problems. And so we want to just get more info from folks so that we can triage the issues better and actually hopefully fix them a lot faster. Now the last thing we're working on is just seeing if we can like bring in more community contributors to the project. So we have a project that we do called Polymer Starter Kit, which right now we have 59 contributors to that project. It is mostly non-Googlers that do the work on this. Some of these folks are here tonight. And I think we want to get to a level with Polymer and the Polymer elements where we have that same level of community interaction and engagement. So one of the things that we're talking about this year is exploring the idea of figuring out how to give maintainership status to various members in the community. So this might mean that we carve out a space for sort of like Polymer elements that are community managed, and that way we can collaborate with those people and help sort of like build them up, make sure that their pull requests are getting merged, that they feel empowered to merge other people's pull requests, and that way again sort of keep on top of all of those elements that we're currently trying to triage and manage. And sorry, so the last thing that we're really going to be working on is promoting awesome stuff, all the stuff that you all are building out there. There's a site called customelements.io, which I'm not sure if y'all have heard of it, but this is sort of like NPM for web components. And right now, there's a ton of great stuff going up on customelements.io, but on the Polymer side, we don't do enough to promote it, right? So this year, we're going to be encouraging more people to go there. We're going to be encouraging more folks to get their elements up there. We're going to make sure that our stuff is showing up over there. One of the really common things people ask for is like a material design date picker. They're like, when's the Polymer team going to give me a date picker? And there actually is a material design date picker. It's awesome. It's responsive. It's really nice. And it exists over on that website. It's just built by a member of the community. So we want to make sure that these things are becoming more visible and that more people are taking part of the ecosystem. Similarly, there is a group of folks called Dodson who, as we mentioned before, are building some really cool business elements, right? So those are at dodson.com/elements. We want to do more to like promote stuff like this and get developers out there. And so rather than thinking that the Polymer team is building everything, that really is more of a community effort and ecosystem thing. So I do this show on YouTube called Polycast, and I'm starting a new series there called Build with Polymer, where we're just going to start highlighting all the cool stuff that everyone out there in the ecosystem is building. So yeah, if you are building something and you want to try and maybe get it featured on the show, if you just like tweet at me with hashtag Build with Polymer, then maybe we can show it off. All right, so wrapping up, if you want to stay on top of things in Polymer land, be sure to follow us on Twitter. You can keep an eye on the Polymer/project repo on GitHub, and also be sure to check out the blog at polymerproject.org. And I think that's my time. So just to wrap up, I'm going to say that I really look forward to seeing where web components are going in 2016, and also looking forward to seeing all the cool stuff that you all are going to build in 2016.